Hey everyone, it's ZLR here, and today I'm going to be talking about week two as a recap. And I'm also going to be wearing the merchandise for the teams that I have them for. And literally, the first team that we have is the Dolphins and the Bills, where I have the old Bills beanie. Yes, I'm a Patriots fan. I have a Bills beanie. Cry about it. But anyway, we had Josh Allen completing 13 passes out of 19 attempts for 139 yards and a touchdown. A lot of um it's just weird that there's not that much passing now. James Cook 11 carries, 78 yards and two touchdowns. We also had Ray Davis with 9 carries, 29 yards. Justin Allen carried it twice for 2 yards. Khalil Shakir carried it once for 2 yards. Khalil Shakir had 5 receptions for 54 yards. Kincaid, I almost just did like how I did the UFL ones. Dalton Kincaid with 4 receptions, 33 yards. Then we also had Ty Johnson with 1 reception for 33 yards. James Cook with 1 reception, 17 yards, and a touchdown. That man had a lot of touchdowns. Then we had Curtis Samuel with 1 reception, 3 yards, and not much else there. Then we had the Dolphins. Tua with 17 completions out of 25 attempts, 145 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. And I hope he's all right from the concussion he sustained. And we also had Skylar Thompson out there, 8 completions, 14 attempts for 80 yards. We had Devin eight Devin Achan, 22 carries, 96 yards. Tua had 2 carries for 17. Then we had Tyreek Hill with 1 carry for 12 yards. Jalen Wright with 5 carries for 4 yards. Skylar Thompson with I hate saying reception when it's carries. 1 carry for 4 yards. Jalen Waddle with 1 carry for 4 yards, and Alec Ingold with 2 carries for 2 yards. We also had Devin Achan with 7 receptions, 69 yards, nice, and 1 touchdown. We also had Jonnu Smith with Jonnu. Damn, I didn't expect that. 6 receptions, 53 yards. Jalen Waddle, 4 receptions, 41 yards. Tyreek Hill, 3 receptions for 24 yards. They got why? Why? Uh Grant DeBose, I believe his name is. He had he had 1 carry, 13 yards. Then we also had Jeff Wilson Jr. with 12 receptions. I mean, no, 12 yards off of 2 receptions. I'm sorry about that one. Uh, then we had Durham Smith. That's a weird way to spell it. 1 reception, 8 yards. And Robbie Anderson, also known as Robbie Chosen, with 1 reception, 5 yards. Next, we had the 49ers and the Vikings, with the Vikings win this one 23-17. In a surprising game, Sam Darnold's doing fucking good. Where did that come from? But, man, I, like, career resurgences and shit that's happening. Very good, very good. But we have Brock Purdy, 28 completions out of 36 attempts for 319 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. There's the yardage that I wanted to see, not no 100 yards. Jordan Mason had 20 carries, 100 yards, and a touchdown. Thank God I have him on fantasy now. Brock Purdy, 2 carries for 12 yards. Isaac Guerrero uh, had 1 carry but didn't gain anything. I'll just mention it because it's there. Deebo Samuel did have 2 carries but lost 10 yards because of it. Deebo also had 8 receptions for 110 yards. George Kittle had 7 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Brandon Ayuk had 4 receptions for 43 yards. We had Jawan Jennings with 2 receptions, 37 yards. We had Eric Saubert, I believe his name is, 2 receptions, 26 yards. Then we have Kyle Juszczyk with 3 receptions, 19 yards. Jordan Mason with 1 reception for 4 yards, as well as Chris Conley with 1 reception, 4 yards. Then we had the Minnesota Vikings with Sam Darnold being out there with 17 completions, 26 attempts, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 8 interception. We had Ty Chandler with 10 carries, 82 yards. We also had Aaron Jones with 9 carries for 32 yards. We had Sam Darnold with 5 carries for 32 yards. Justin Jefferson had 4 receptions, 133 yards, and a touchdown. Great game from him. Then we had Jalen Nailor with 3 receptions, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Decent game from him. Aaron Jones, 5 receptions for 36 yards. Then we had Trent Sherfield Sr. I almost said junior. I don't know where I saw a friggin' J. 1 reception, 17 yards. Then we had Brandon Powell with 2 receptions, 16 yards. And Johnny Munt with 2 receptions for 12 yards. And then there was the Seahawks and the Patriots. Got my Patriots red on for this one. We had a overtime game. Holy crap. And this one was a good one. 23-20, Seahawks won it, unfortunately, but honestly, I couldn't be mad at it because we held on with the friggin' Seahawks all through that game. All through it. So, honestly, can't be mad. But we had Geno Smith, 33 completions out of 44 attempts for 327 yards and a touchdown. Zach Charbonnet with 14 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown. And Geno Smith with 5 carries and 8 yards. DK Metcalf had 10 receptions, 129 yards, and a touchdown. Jackson Smith Najiba had 12 receptions, 17 yards. Jesus Christ, I really hate trying to say that because one slip up and you're fucked. Zach Charbonnet had 5 receptions, 31 yards. Tyler Lockett had 2 receptions for 15 yards. Jake Bobo had 2 receptions for 15 yards. I love how Brandon Perna says that. Noah Fant had 1 reception for 14 yards. And Laviska Shenault Jr. had 1 reception for 6 yards. Then my New England Patriots, Jacoby Brissett had 15 carries for 27 yards, 15 carries, 27 attempts, 149 yards, and a touchdown. Ugh. Horrible. Antonio Gibson had 11 carries, 96 yards, and Ramondre Stevenson had 21 carries, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Our running game looks a lot better than last year. Jacoby Brissett, 2 carries, 6 yards. JaMycal Hasty with 1 carry. Did I say receptions for Jacoby Brissett? I don't know. I'll have to look back on this. If I did, I meant to say carries. But JaMychal Hasty, 1 carry for 2 yards. And Jalen Polk had a carry but didn't gain anything out of it. Hunter Henry was our leading receiver with 8 receptions, 109 yards. Jalen Polk got 2 receptions, 12 yards, and his first regular season touchdown and his first career touchdown, as from what I saw on the New England Patriots thing. Because they don't count friggin' right preseason. Ramondre Stevenson, two receptions for 9 yards. Antonio Gibson, 1 reception for 7 yards, as well as KJ Osborne. And Austin Hooper had 1 reception for 5 yards. Then we had the Giants and the Commanders, with the Commanders winning this one 21-18. Lil Marco, very happy about that one, I know. But we had Daniel Jones, 18. I mean, I saw the 16, but also saw the 8 with the attempts. 16 completions, 28 attempts, 178 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He had a decent game there. At least more decent than how it was last week. Holy shit, I felt bad for that guy because he was getting heckled even just trying to get to, I think it was like his bus or something. Devin Singletary, 16 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown. He's pretty decent. Daniel Jones also had 5 carries for 32 yards, and we also had sorry about that. Had to clear my throat real quick. My phone's acting super weird. I'm just trying to get. And Tyrone Tracy Jr., 1 carry for 2 yards. We had Malik. Wow, there was really no one on the field for them. Malik Neighbors, 10 receptions, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Darius Slayton with 3 receptions for 33 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson with 2 receptions, 18 yards, and 1 touchdown. And Devin Singletary had a catch but didn't gain anything from it. And from the Commanders, we had Jaden Daniels, 23 completions out of 29 attempts for 226 yards. Brian Robinson had 17 carries for 133 yards. Jaden Daniels had 10 carries for 44. And Austin Eckler had 8 carries for 38 yards. We had Zach Ertz with 4 receptions for 62 yards. We had Noah Brown with 3 receptions for 56 yards. Oof. I also saw Austin Eckler on there. My phone's just being so goddamn slow. Austin Eckler, 3 receptions for 47 yards. Now I gotta get back to it. Scary Terry, with 6 receptions for 22 yards. We also had, Damie Brown, I don't know. 2 receptions for 17 yards. Olamide Zacchaeus with 3 receptions for 14 yards. John Bates with 1 reception for 5 yards. And last but not least, we had Brian Robinson with 1 reception for 3 yards. But I will also mention the kicker, Austin Seibert, because he kicked all 21 points for the friggin' Commanders. All 7 field goals were made. Then we had the Chargers and the Panthers, with the Chargers winning 26-3. And Bryce Young benched for Andy Dalton as of, I believe, yesterday. That was a crazy thing for me to see, but I mean, kind of obvious when he went. I think it was like what 2-16 for his starts, something like that. But we had Justin Herbert, 14 completions out of 20 attempts, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. J.K. Dobbins with 17 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown. Gus Edwards with 18 carries, 59 yards. Justin Herbert with 6 carries, 18 yards. And Hassan Haskins with 3 carries for 11 yards. We also had Quentin Johnston. I I I don't know why I said Johnson. Um, so close from Johnson and Johnston. But 5 receptions, 51 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Will Dissly had 3 receptions for 29 yards. Ladd McConkey had 2 receptions for 26 yards. Joshua Palmer had 2 receptions for 19 yards. Hayden Hurst had 1 reception for 5 yards. And J.K. Dobbins had a reception but didn't gain any yards from it. Then we have Bryce Young, 18 completions, 26 attempts, 84 yards, and a interception. Oh boy. Oh boy. Then we had it's Chuba Hubbard, I believe. 10 carries, 64 yards. Miles Sanders with 7 carries for 20 yards. And Bryce Young, 1 carry for 6 yards. Then we had Tommy Tremmel with 3 receptions for 23 yards. Adam Thielen with 2 receptions for 20 yards. Deontay Johnson with 3 receptions for 15 yards. Chuba Hubbard with 4 receptions for 12 yards. Jatavion Sanders with 2 receptions for 8 yards. Then we have Miles Sanders with 3 receptions for 5 yards. And Jonathan Mingo with 1 reception and 1 yard. Saints versus Cowboys was next, and I have a Cowboys jersey, a alternate Leighton Vander Esch jersey, which is actually pretty nice. But we have Derek Carr, 11 completions out of 16 attempts, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Alvin Kamara, 20 carries, 115 yards, and 3 touchdowns. We also had Jamal Williams with 8 carries for 39 yards. We had Taysom Hill with 3 carries, 18 yards. Rashid Shaheed with 3 carries for 13 yards. Chris Olave with 1 carry for 7 yards. Derek Carr with 1 carry for 1 yard and a touchdown. Probably a quarterback sneak that was. But we have Rashid Shaheed with 4 receptions, 96 yards, and a touchdown. Chris Olave with 4 receptions and 81 yards. Alvin Kamara with 2 receptions, 65 yards, and a touchdown. 40 plus points in fantasy for that guy. And Taysom Hill with 1 reception for 1 yard. And then for the Cowboys side of things, we had Dak Prescott with 27 completions, 39 attempts for 293 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Cooper Rush also completed 1 pass out of 3 attempts for 6 yards. We had Rico Dowdle with 7 carries, 30 yards. Ezekiel Elliott had 6 carries for 16 yards. Dak Prescott had 2 carries for 12 yards. Then we had Deuce Vaughn with 4 carries, 11 yards. Cavante Turpin with 1 carry for 2 yards. Brandon Cooks carried it 1 time but lost 3 yards. CeeDee Lamb had 4 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown. We had Jalen Tolbert with 6 receptions for 82 yards. We had Luke Schoonmaker with 6 receptions for 43 yards. We had Rico Dowdle with 4 receptions, 29 yards. Brandon Cooks with 2 receptions, 19 yards. Ezekiel Elliott with 2 receptions, 16 yards. Jalen Brooks with 1 reception, 10 yards. Deuce Vaughn with 1 reception, 6 yards. And also Cavante Turpin with 2 receptions for 4 yards. Then we had the Colts and the Packers, with the Packers winning this one 16-10. We had Anthony Richardson with 17 completions out of 34 attempts, 204 yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions. We had Jonathan Taylor with 12 carries, 103 yards. Anthony Richardson had 4 carries for 37 yards. And also Trey Sermon had 2 carries but didn't gain anything out of it. We had Alec Pierce with 5 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. We had Jonathan Taylor with 2 receptions for 32 yards. We had Adonai Mitchell with 1 reception, 30 yards. Mo Ali Cox with 1 reception, 22 yards. Michael Pittman Jr. with 3 receptions for 21 yards. We had Ashton Dulin with 1 reception, 13 yards. We also had Alec Ogletree with 1 reception, 12 yards. We had Kylan Granson with 1 reception, 9 yards. We had Trey Sermon with 1 reception, 7 yards. And Tyler Goodson with 1 reception for 2 yards. Then we had Malik Willis, 12 completions, 14 attempts, 122 yards, and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs, 32 carries, 151 yards. Malik Willis, 6 carries, 41 yards. Jaden Reed, 2 carries for 37 yards. Then we had Marshawn Lloyd, 6 carries for 15 yards. I saw the 15 40 yards and said 16. I don't know why. Emmanuel Wilson, 5 carries for 9 yards. And Bo Melton with 2 carries for 8 yards. Romeo Dobbs, 3 carries, 62 yards. 3 receptions for 62 yards. Dontavian Wicks, 3 receptions, 26 yards, and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft, 2 receptions, 16 yards. Jaden Reed, 2 receptions for 9 yards. Luke Musgrave with 1 reception, 6 yards. And Marshawn Lloyd with 1 reception and 3 yards. Then we have the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars, where I am going to be wearing my Cleveland Browns Baker Mayfield alternate jersey. We had Deshaun Watson, 22 completions out of 34 attempts for 186 yards. We had Jerome Ford with 7 carries, 64 yards. Donta Foreman with 14 carries, 42 yards. Deshaun Watson had 5 carries, 20 yards, and a touchdown. We also had Jameis Winston, 2 carries, 4 yards. And Pierre Strong Jr. had a carry but lost 5 yards. Jerry Jeudy, 5 receptions, 73 yards. Elijah Moore had 6 receptions for 44 yards. If I said carries for Jerry Jeudy, I meant receptions. Then we had David Bell with 3 receptions for 27 yards. We had Amari Cooper with 3 receptions for 11 yards. Jordan Atkins with 1 reception for 10 yards, as well as Pierre Strong Jr., who had the same reception and yardage as Jordan Atkins. Then we had the Jaguars side of things, where we had Trevor Lawrence, 14 completions out of 30 attempts, 220 yards. Travis Etienne Jr. had 13 carries, 52 yards, and a touchdown. Trevor Lawrence had 2 carries, 45 yards. D'Ernest Johnson had 5 carries for 26 yards, and Devin Duvernay had 1 carry for 4 yards. We also had Brian Thomas Jr., 2 receptions for 94 yards. We had Brenton Strange with 3 receptions for 65 yards. Gabe Davis with 3 receptions for 43 yards. We had Luke Farnell with two receptions for 13 yards. Travis Etienne Jr. had 3 receptions, 6 yards. And Christian Kirk had 1 reception but lost a yard because of it. Then we had the Jets and the Titans, with the Jets win at 24-17. Aaron Rodgers got 18 completions out of 30 attempts for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. Breece Hall had 14 carries, 62 yards. Braylon Allen had 7 carries, 33 yards, and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson had 1 carry for 5 yards, and Aaron Rodgers carried it twice for a yard. Garrett Wilson also had 4 receptions, 57 yards. Breece Hall had 7 receptions, 52 yards, and a touchdown. Braylon Allen had 2 receptions, 23 yards, and a touchdown. Mike Williams had 1 reception for 19 yards. Allen Lazard had 2 receptions for 11 yards. We had Tyler Conklin with 1 reception, 10 yards, and Malachi Corkley with 1 reception and 4 yards. Then for the Titans side, we had Will Levis with 19 completions out of 28 attempts, 192 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Tony Pollard had 17 carries, 62 yards. Will Levis had 4 carries, 38 yards. Tajay Spears had 6 carries for 20 yards. Calvin Ridley had 1 carry, 10 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 4 carries, 77 yards, and a touchdown. Tony Pollard had 5 receptions for 40 yards. Tyler Boyd had 2 receptions for 26 yards. Chig Okonkwo had 3 receptions for 16 yards. Josh Weil had 2 receptions for 13 yards. Tajay Spears had 2 receptions for 11 yards. And DeAndre Hopkins had 1 reception for 9 yards. Then we had the Buccaneers and the Lions, with the Buccaneers winning 20-16 in a pretty close game here. We had Baker Mayfield with 12 completions out of 19 attempts for 185 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also had 5 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. Bucky Irvin had 7 carries for 22 yards. And also Rachaad White had 10 carries for 18 yards. Cade Otton carried it once but lost yards because of it. Chris Godwin, 1 reception, 117 yards, and a touchdown. Mike Evans, 3 receptions for 42 yards. We had Jalen McMillan with 1 reception, 21 yards, and Rachaad White with 1 reception for 5 yards. And for the Lions side of things, we had Jared Goff, 34 completions out of 55 attempts, 307 yards, and 2 interceptions. We also had Jack Fox with 1 completion out of 1 attempt for 17 yards. We had Jahmyr Gibbs with 13 carries, 84 yards. David Montgomery with 11 carries, 35 yards, and a touchdown. We also had Jameson Williams with 1 carry for 15 yards. And Jared Goff carried it twice for 5 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 11 carries, 119 yards. Then we had Jameson Williams with 5 carries for 79 yards. David Montgomery with 4 carries for 35. We had Khalif Raymond with 3 receptions for 27 yards. We had Jahmyr Gibbs with 7 receptions for 22 yards. We had Sion Vaki with 1 reception for 17 yards. Sam Laporta had 2 receptions for 13 yards. And Tim Patrick had 2 receptions for 12 yards. Then we had the Ravens and the Raiders game, with the Raiders winning at 26-23. We had Gardner Minshew with 30 completions out of 38 attempts, 276 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. We had Zamir White with 9 carries, 24 yards, DJ Turner with 1 carry, 2 yards, Alexander Madison with 4 carries, a yard, and a touchdown. Amir Abdullah with 2 carries for 1 yard. And Gardner Minshew tried to carry it once, but lost a yard because of it. Then we had Devontae Adams, 9 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. Brock Bowers with 9 receptions for 98 yards. Jacoby Myers with 4 receptions, 29 yards. Zamir White with 3 receptions for 14 yards. We had Trey Tucker with 2 receptions for 13 yards. Michael Mayer with 1 reception for 11 yards. And Amir Abdullah with 2 receptions for 1 yard. For the Ravens side of things, we had Lamar Jackson completing 21 passes out of 34 attempts, 247 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Derrick Henry had 18 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Lamar Jackson had 5 carries for 45 yards. And we had Justice Hill with 4 carries for 22 yards. We had Zay Flowers with 7 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, 4 receptions, 51 yards. Rashad Bateman with 3 receptions, 40 yards. Isaiah Likely with 2 receptions for 26 yards. Nelson Aguilar with 1 reception, 13 yards. Derrick Henry had 1 reception for 12 yards. Justice Hill had 2 receptions for 10 yards. And last but not least, Charlie Kolar had 1 reception for 4 yards. Then we had the Rams and the Cardinals game, with the Cardinals winning 41-10. And I'm wearing a Cardinals jersey for this one. Matthew Stafford had 19 completions, 27 attempts, 216 yards. We had, I believe it was Blake Corum with 8 carries, 28 yards. And Kyren Williams had 12 carries, 25 yards, and a touchdown. We had Demarcus Robinson with 2 receptions, 50 yards. We had Tutu Atwell with 3 receptions for 48 yards. Cooper Kupp had 4 receptions for 37 yards. I hope he gets better as soon as possible. We had Kyren Williams with 4 receptions, 27 yards. Jordan Whittington had 2 receptions for 22 yards. We had Tyler Johnson with 2 receptions for 20 yards. And Colby Parkinson with 1 reception, 12 yards. Ronnie Rivers had a reception but didn't gain anything out of it. Then the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, 17 completions, 21 attempts, 266 yards, and 3 touchdowns. We had James Conner with 21 carries, 122 yards, and a touchdown. Kyler Murray had 5 carries for 59 yards. We had Amari Demercado with 2 carries for 46 yards. We also had Trey Benson with 11 carries for 10 yards. And Clayton Tune carried it once but lost 6 yards. Marvin Harrison Jr. got the ball way more than last game. 4 receptions, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Trey McBride had 6 receptions for 67 yards. Michael Wilson had 2 receptions for 31 yards. Elijah Higgins had 1 reception, 18 yards, and a touchdown. We had Greg Dortch with 2 receptions for 11 yards. We also had Trey Benson with 1 reception, 7 yards. And James Conner with 1 reception for 2 yards. Then we had the Bengals and the Chiefs, and I'm going to be wearing my Kareem Hunt Chiefs jersey. We had Joe Burrow, 23 completions out of 36 attempts, 258 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We also had Zach Moss with 12 carries for 34 yards. we had Chase Brown with 4 carries for 31 yards, and Joe Burrow carried it 6 times for 9 yards. Nice. Mike Gesicki had 7 receptions, 91 yards. We had Jermaine Burton with 1 reception for 47 yards. Jamar Chase had 4 receptions for 35 yards. Eric All Jr. had 4 receptions for 32 yards. We had Drew Sample with 3 receptions, 28 yards. Zach Moss had 1 reception for 13 yards. Andre Losevis, I believe his name is, 2 receptions, 7 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And we also had Trenton Irwin with 1 reception and 5 yards. And for the Chiefs side of things, we had Patty Mahomes with 18 completions, 25 attempts, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. We had Isaiah Pacheco with 19 carries, 90 yards. I hope he's all right from the injury he has. Kermit Mahomes had 4 carries for 29 yards. I can't. After I saw the Kermit Mahomes thing with, I don't know what team had him, but they had Kermit the Frog with Patrick Mahomes stuff on him. They had Carson Steele with 7 carries for 24 yards, Xavier Worthy with 1 carry for 5 yards, and Travis Kelce even carried the ball once for a yard. We had Rashee Rice with 5 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown. We had Justin Watson with 2 receptions for 22 yards. If I said carries for Rashee Rice, I meant to say receptions. Isaiah Pacheco had 5 receptions for 21 yards. Xavier Worthy had 2 receptions for 17 yards. We had Jared Wiley with 1 reception, 7 yards. Travis Kelce had 1 reception for 5 yards. Sam J. Pirine had 1 reception for 3 yards. And Wanya Morris had 1 reception, 1 yard, and a touchdown. Then we had the Steelers and the Broncos. I have my last jersey on right now because I don't have Bears, Texans, Falcons, or Eagles jersey right now. So, yeah, this is the last jersey you guys are getting to see in this video. But we had Justin Fields, 13 completions out of 20 attempts, 117 yards, and a touchdown. Najee Harris had 17 carries for 69 yards. Nice. Jaylen Warren had 9 carries for 42 yards. Justin Fields had 8 carries for 27 yards. And Cordell Patterson had 2 carries for 3 yards. We had Pat Freiermuth with 4 receptions, 39 yards. We had George Pickens with 2 receptions, 29 yards. Jaylen Warren with 2 receptions, 19 yards. Van Jefferson with 2 receptions, 14 yards. We had Calvin Austin with 1 reception, 6 yards. Najee Harris had 1 reception and 5 yards. We also had Darnell Washington. He had 1 reception, 5 yards, just like Najee Harris, but also had a touchdown. And for the Broncos side, we have Bo Nix, 20 completions out of 35 attempts, 246 yards, and 2 interceptions. Bo Nix also had 4 carries for 25 yards. We had Javonte Williams with 11 carries for 17 yards. We had Tyler Batty with 1 carry for 16 yards. And Jaleel McLaughlin with 3 carries for 6 yards. I don't know why I laughed there. Josh Reynolds had 4 receptions, 93 yards. We had Lil Jordan Humphrey with 4 receptions, 50 yards. We had Javonte Williams with 5 receptions, 48 yards. We had Cortland Sutton with 1 reception, 26 yards. Greg Dulcich with 3 receptions, 16 yards. Marvin Mims with 1 reception, 10 yards. Tyler Batty with 1 reception, 2 yards. And Michael Burton with 1 reception and 1 yard. Then we had the Texans and the Bears, with the Texans winning this one 19-13. We had Caleb Williams completing 23 passes out of 37 attempts for 174 yards and 2 interceptions. He also had 5 carries for 44 yards. DeAndre Swift had 14 carries for 18 yards. We also had Travis Homer with one carry for 6 yards. If I said receptions for DeAndre Swift, I meant to say carries. Sorry if I did. Then we had Khalil Herbert with 2 carries, 3 yards, and a touchdown. We had DJ Moore with 6 receptions, 53 yards. Rome Odunze with 2 receptions for 33 yards. We had DeAndre Carter with 3 receptions for 32 yards. Cole Kmet with 4 receptions, 27 yards. DeAndre Swift with 4 receptions, 24 yards. Khalil Herbert with 2 receptions for 4 yards. And Gerald Everett with 2 receptions for 1 yard. And for the Texans side of things, we had C.J. Stroud with 23 completions out of 36 attempts, 260 yards, and a touchdown. We had Cam Akers with 7 carries, 32 yards. Joe Mixon had 9 carries for 25 yards. Tank Dell had 3 carries for 16 yards. Then we had Dare Ogumbale with 2 carries for 3 yards. And CJ Stroud tried to carry it once but lost a yard because of it. Nico Collins had 8 receptions, 135 yards, and a touchdown. He's going to be nasty this year. Stephon Diggs, 4 receptions, 37 yards. Joe Mixon had 3 receptions for 25 yards. Dalton Schultz had 2 receptions for 21 yards. Ogumbale had 2 receptions for 20 yards. We had Cade Stover with 1 reception for 18 yards. Brevin Jordan with 1 reception for 4 yards. Cam Akers with 1 reception for 3 yards. And Tank Dell caught the ball once but lost a few yards because of it. And to end the video off, we have the Falcons and the Eagles, with the Falcons winning this one 22-21. We had Kirk Cousins completing 20 passes out of 29 attempts for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. We had Bijan Robinson with 14 carries for 97 yards. We had Tyler Algier with 9 carries for 53 yards. Ray McLeod had 1 carry for 3 yards. Kirk Cousins carried it 4 times but has a total of -1 yard. Darnell Mooney had 3 receptions for 88 yards and a touchdown. We had Drake London with 6 receptions, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Ray McLeod had 3 receptions for 42 yards. Bijan Robinson had 4 receptions for 25 yards. Kyle Pitts had 3 receptions for 20 yards. And Tyler Algier had 1 reception for 12 yards. For the Eagles side of things, we had Jalen Hurts with 23 completions out of 30 attempts, 183 yards, a touchdown, and a interception. Saquon Barkley had 22 carries, 95 yards. Jalen Hurts had 13 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown. And Kenneth Gainwell had 2 carries for 6 yards. We had Devonta Smith with 7 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert with 3 receptions, 38 yards. We had Britton Covey with 6 receptions, 23 yards. Saquon Barkley had 4 receptions for 21 yards. Grant Calcaterra with 2 receptions and 19 yards. And finally, Jahan Dotson with 1 reception for 6 yards. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you really want to do. And as always, I'll see you all in the next video. See you around.